Hey guys.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello, Professor.
How is everybody?
Good and yourself?
Hello, Professor.
Hey Professor.
I'm tired, but we're hanging in. We're going to make it through. All right, go ahead and sign in the chat box if you haven't already, so I can get attendance. We'll give everybody a few minutes before we get started. Where is everybody tonight? He's running a little late, it looks like. Right, Sabrina? Yeah, that's probably exactly what it is. We'll give folks just another minute or
I have
two
a
and then,
question.
sure.
Okay, about the webbing. So for the daily one and the unit one, does it have to be two different lesson plans? Well, lesson plans.
No, so what you can do is from your unit one, pick one of those activities to do your daily one for.
Okay.
Yep. Good question. Anybody else with any questions while we're waiting for everybody to get on here? Hey, Bree Bree.
Hey guys.
Hey, Bree Bree.
Hello.
I was waiting to see who was going to say hi to you first, Bree.
She was in here before me, so I guess she beat me to the punch.
Deidre got our camera on today.
I do. I don't know. It just came on. I'm going to definitely turn it off, just so you know.
I'd be feeling bad, Professor, just be looking at nothing.
There's a couple of you that have pictures up, so you know.
Yeah, I have a picture though, and it's a cute picture.
And it is a very cute picture.
Outside of
I
this,
know
look
when
like
I'm
that going on right here.
when I'm on my
Would you
laptop, the
rather-
picture don't show.
Would you rather look at me looking crazy like this, or my
Yes.
cute picture, or my cute profile picture?
We'd rather
Way.
look at you
Don't
looking
care.
crazy like that.
Right?
Yes, because he be all in the camera like he know us.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah, that's all right. I love it. He keeps us entertained, right? All right. Well, I am going to go ahead and get us started. If you haven't signed in the chat box, go ahead and do that so I can make sure and grab everybody for attendance. So I wanted to share with you some things that I've been working on. I've been very busy since we met on Monday night. So I have I've gotten the rubric up, so hopefully you guys can all see the rubric for your group project. This should help you all as you're putting together your project as far as what it is that I'm looking for and how you're going to get your points and everything. So this is in the Blackboard. Let me, well, that's not it. Let me show you where it's at in case you want to go find it. So it is, if you go into assignments, into group project, the curriculum report, I actually put in a document as well that kind of has everything that I put in the rubric. So I put that all into a Word doc too. But when you click on the assignment, the rubric is right there. So you should be able to see it from there. And then again, I put the document here so that you guys should be able to see all of the things that I'm looking for with this group project. I will tell you that the group project isn't due until March 6th. I say until, like, that's only a month away. The curriculum analysis, I almost have the rubric done for that, but I am waiting to hear back from the other professors in the department because there's the syllabus talks about let me find what it says it is, an assessment and reflection tool, but I have no idea what that is. So I'm waiting to hear back from the other professors. I emailed them yesterday, and there's one has already gotten back to me and said that she doesn't have it. So I'm hoping that somebody has it. If not, I'm gonna pull something out of the air. It just might take me a few minutes to do that. So I've been working on the rubric for that because I know that's what's due soon. That's due on the 20th. So I want to make sure that you guys know exactly what it is that I'm looking for with that. So I'm trying to make sure that all the rubrics are in, all of the expectations for the assignments are up on Blackboard. Like I said, as soon as I hear back from the other professors that have taught this class before, as far as that assessment and reflection tool, I will share that with you all. If I have to make one, as soon as I get it made, I'll get it to you guys. And my hope would be to have that tomorrow, hopefully at the latest. So Professor Charles is doing some digging for me right now. So hopefully she'll find something that I can use and share out with you guys. Any questions on rubrics or assignments before we dive into approaches to learning? No? All right. If when you get in to look at things, if you have a question about something, email me. Just shoot me a message and let me know, and I will be happy to try to help answer it. So tonight we are going to start our focus on each of the content areas or the domains according to the standards. So tonight we're focusing on approaches to learning, which is the hardest one to plan for. Well, yeah, approaches to learning, I feel like is the one that people struggle with the most, including myself. Social emotional is hard to plan activities for too, because so much of that happens in the moment that it's hard to plan an activity for social emotional. And I think approaches to learning kind of falls in the same category. So what I've decided to do is that each week when we have one of these domains to look into, I'm going to do this same layout. We're going to go through a PowerPoint. We're going to look at the standard. We're going to see what it actually is defined as according to the DC Early Learning Standards. Then we're going to go through and look at the subcategories or substrands or however we want to word that. And then I'm going to have us jump into breakout rooms, and each room is going to be assigned depending on how many subcategories there are, will depend on how many breakout rooms we have or how many of the subcategories. But basically, like tonight, attends and engages with curiosity. So one group is going to come up with activities and ideas around experiences around how we can help children attend to and engage with curiosity. This is the hard one. We're starting on the hard one because it's tough to come up with some ideas and activities for this. But so we'll do breakout groups for that. And then we'll come back as a whole group and talk about how we kind of integrate the domain or standard into our environment. So what I have done, because I'm really intrigued by the fact that every state has different standards and that some of them are drastically different. So what I've done for you guys, and each week when we do this, I'll have the page numbers for each of these that align with whatever standard we're doing. But I wanted to make sure that I included Maryland and Virginia because I know some of you may not be working in DC or may not intend to stay in DC if that's where you're working now because you live in Virginia or Maryland. So I wanted to make sure that we included those. I personally am most familiar with the Delaware standards, which they actually call foundations. So it's the early learning foundations, not the early learning standards. So if I slip and say foundations, I mean standards, they all kind of mean the same thing. But I've also had a lot of experience with Pennsylvania, and I wanted to share these with you guys so that you can see some of the differences. I think some of the states do a much better job of explaining activities and ideas that we can do with these. So I will put all of these links into the chat box so that when you guys are in your groups, you can pull these up because there will be suggestions on how you can incorporate these standards into your curriculum. So PA, what I love about the Pennsylvania standards is that they actually have a glossary at the end of each content area. So important keywords, they have an actual glossary for each content area. And I just think that's really impactful, especially when we think about the importance of language and literacy and kind of educating ourselves. So the way that Pennsylvania has their standards set up, whether you've taken all of these courses and have had this deep dive into the standards or not, you should still be able to utilize their standards. I also find it interesting that some states split up infant, toddler, and then preschool. So Delaware has an infant, toddler foundations, and then they have a preschool foundations. Pennsylvania has an infant, toddler, a pre-K, and then a kindergarten, and then a first grade. So PA has really looked at this early childhood as this birth to 8 and has really taken that K to first and second into account here. So the ones that I've pulled up are just the infant, toddler, and the pre-K. But if you're working with the kindergarten, first grade, you can absolutely search Pennsylvania Early Learning Standards and you can find their kindergarten and their first grade ones. Virginia's were a little hard to find because what first came up when I Googled it was something from 2013 and it was only for 4-year-olds. So 10 years ago, Virginia didn't have any standards for birth to 3. It was just for pre-K. So I find that very interesting. They now have a current version that's in a draft form, but it is inclusive of birth to age 5. So I think that's good to see that the state is making some progress. Maryland, I had a hard time finding the approaches to learning in Maryland's standards because theirs is just set up very differently. Most of the other states have it very clear cut as to like each of the domains, and approaches to learning is clearly defined, like table of contents, it's listed there. But in Maryland, it's actually under one of their other contents. So it was a little tricky. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this so that I can share all of those links with you all in the chat box, so that if you so desire, you can look them up. Oh, they didn't link though. All right, hold on. It didn't work the way I wanted it to. So while I'm copying and pasting links for you guys, what do you guys think about approaches to learning? What do you know about it? Do you have any feelings about the approaches to learning in any way, shape, or form? Anybody feel like it's their strong point in planning?
I feel like it's the worst part of me. I mean, I feel like I just want to teach. I don't want to have to deal with like, oh, is this a standard? Oh, am I meeting these standards? So for me, it's like kind of not what I want to do.
And that's fair. That is very fair. I think that for a while, Delaware was requiring programs to kind of note on their lesson plan the early learning standard that the activity went with. So I became pretty familiar with the early learning standards. And I think that what I found when I was in the classroom with the early learning foundations, when Delaware first rolled it out, was that I was missing a lot of areas. So I would get hyper focused on like my favorite content areas, right? Or the things that I was most comfortable with and most familiar with. So it wasn't until I really looked through the standards, and what I did was, because we don't want the standards to become a checklist for learning, right? Like it's not, oh, yep, they did A1, they did A2, A3, done. We don't have to worry about it anymore. What we want to do is to use the standards as a way to say, did I give the children an opportunity to learn this? So what I found was, when I kind of noted which standards I had given them opportunities for, there was a whole chunk of sections that I had not that I had not given them opportunities for. So yes, we want to just teach. We don't have to want to worry about the standards, but we have to kind of pay attention to them to make sure that throughout the course of the time that children are with us, that we have made sure that we've given them multiple opportunities to experience things that will help them learn each of those skills and standards. So they're not fun. I don't think they're quite as terrible as like Common Core, but it definitely should give you a framework so that you can make sure that you're incorporating all of the different standards and experiences into your classroom. Because it's, and like I said, approaches to learning is one of the hardest ones to kind of grasp and put our brains around. So it'll be fun kind of coming up with these tonight. And I say fun in all kinds of kidding. So let me find the Pennsylvania ones for you. It's the only one I don't have up yet. And then you guys should all have access to the DC early learning standards. It's in the resource file folder for you guys for this class. But there are, so in the chat box I've put for you guys Virginia, Maryland, the 2 Delaware, and the 2 Pennsylvania. Just to kind of give you something to look at. I think, like I said, it's really interesting to kind of compare. I've been a little disappointed a couple of times when I've been looking through the DC early learning standards. I was like, I want more, because I'm used to some of these other states that give more for certain areas. So we'll kind of utilize those as we come through and talking about some of these activities. So let me get back to PowerPoint. All right, so let's go down to the next slide here. Okay, so according to the DC Early Learning Standards, approaches to learning is how children perceive and process information. So I think about the fact that approaches to learning is part of everything that children do, right? The way that they perceive and process information. But how do we set up an activity to help them learn how to perceive and process information? I think for us, that piece comes into our follow-up questions, our follow-up activities. How do we engage them and take them to the next level, right? How do we scaffold for them? So I think the approaches to learning is really how we set up activities for them in order to guide them to process information, right? If we don't ever give them information, they can't process it. The standards, the DC Early Learning Standards also says that the skills related to thinking includes remembering, problem solving, and decision making. So again, these are things that they're doing all day long, right? They're problem solving in almost every single activity that they do throughout the day. They are making decisions. Hopefully they are making their own decisions several times throughout the day. But again, we need to give them that opportunity to make those decisions for themselves and not just do everything for them. So again, this comes back to the questions we ask, following up on things the next day, making sure that we're connecting prior learning to the next activity. So if we're having, if we're doing an activity on winter, right? So we can say, who remembers last year? Who went sledding last year? Did we have enough snow last year to go sledding? It's that prior learning. So if we can ask those kinds of questions, it gets them to recall information, and that's really important. But we have to provide those opportunities for them. What I find really interesting, and I think that's why this one has so much weight to it, that feels like it feels heavy, that children need the skill set to be successful in school and later in life. They need to be able to figure out what to do, right? How to do it, how to coordinate skills in order to accomplish a task. Think about all of the ways that you all have to perceive and process information as adults. How do you guys utilize problem solving and decision making? How many times a day do you have to solve a problem and make a decision? Way too many for my taste, right? I'd rather not have to make any more decisions. Somebody else just make all the decisions for me, and I'll just go along with it for at least a little bit. As adults, how often do you have to figure out, especially for those of you that are taking 3, 4, 5 classes a semester, how do you figure out what you need to do and when you need to do it? How do you make sure that you have your tasks lined up? How do you make sure that you have what you need to complete the task, right? So for some of you that may struggle, maybe you don't have your approaches to learning down yet, right? So it's something to think about. Did you have the opportunities to learn how to problem solve, to learn how to make decisions, to learn how to coordinate things in order to accomplish a task? I struggle with this next bullet point because I think it gives people something to say, but we have to do this, right? So yes, children need to learn to control their impulses. Children need to learn how to multitask. Children need to learn how to follow directions, and children need to learn how to focus. Children need to learn how to wait. Children need to learn how to do worksheets. They don't need to have it mastered at 3 and 4 years old, right? So we're learning. It's a learning process. For those of you that had me for play last semester and the observations, it was a learning process, right? Like by the time you got through the second or third observation, you weren't missing as many points because you were learning how to do them. And I didn't expect any of you to have it down pat the first assignment. So thinking about children and impulse control. Yes, by the time they're 6, 7, they should have a pretty good grasp on impulse control. But how many of us as adults still have trouble with impulse control? Right? How many of you just do something because you want to, or you go buy something because you just wanted it, right? And you don't have that impulse control. Right, exactly. So think about this. We're asking children to do things that we as adults can't do. And I think that that is something that we really have to think about. We constantly are asking children to do things that is so beyond them, and it's often beyond us. So yes, we need to work on teaching them how to do it, but we can't expect them to be perfect with it and to do it all the time. So they are not going to be perfect at controlling their impulses. Retail therapy is so real, and darn Amazon, because it makes life so easy. And now everything delivers, like even DoorDash now, like everything feels like retail therapy. Multitasking. How many of you as adults can't multitask, right? The whole like rubbing your stomach and patting your head at the same time, like, can you do that as an adult? Right? The old saying, you can't chew gum and walk at the same time, you can't multitask, right? So again, we're asking children to do things that we as adults can't do. So I struggle with this bullet point, because yes, we need to work on it. Yes, we need to help children learn these things, but we absolutely should not expect them to have mastered this at 2, 3, and 4 years old. Following directions, there's a lot of research that will, and if you look at like the milestones for the age groups, following a 1-step direction is okay. Following a 2-step direction as you get a little bit older, right? So oftentimes we will tell kids, go get your coat and go get in line and da 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 da. Okay, well, they lost you at go get your coat. They didn't catch the second part of that. They can't process that far out yet. And again, it's that coordination, right? And I need to do this, to do that, to do this. So we have to be patient with kids, and we have to continue to offer opportunities for them to learn how to do these things, but not expect them to be perfect at it. I thought it was interesting that the DC Early Learning Standards focus on, or kind of brought attention to the fact that this concept of executive functioning is getting a lot of attention. So thinking about approaches to learning as executive function skills might make it a little bit more relatable, right? So approaches to learning sounds kind of like, what is that? I don't know. But if we say we're working on executive function skills, you're like, oh, all right, I got it. That makes a little bit more sense. But it's still hard to plan for. Absolutely, we need to model. So again, how can we expect children to do things that we as adults can't do, right? So we need to model it as best we can for them. And then the standard, and I will tell you guys, this is the paragraph at the beginning of the section for approaches to learning in the DC Early Learning Standards. So I literally just copied and pasted it, but I wanted to make sure that we kind of took some time to go over each of the sentences, and so I put them in bullet form. But I left the last group together because it's really talking about what you as a teacher can do. And I think that's the important piece that we need to start to think about, is how are we planning for this? How are you as the teacher making sure that you're providing opportunities for children to learn how to approach their own learning? Any questions? Thoughts about approaches to learning? No thoughts on it? All right, so let's look and see what the 4 substrands, categories, whatever. So DC has taken this approaches to learning and they've added the logic and reasoning. Not all of the other states have added that logic and reasoning to this. Some of them have logic and reasoning in other pieces. It might be in like some of the mathematical pieces. It may be in some of the other content areas. So I think it's interesting that DC put them together here. Attends and engages with curiosity. So what does that mean? What does that mean to you guys? What does it mean to attend and engage with curiosity?
They ask questions to further their knowledge.
Awesome.
If it's a baby, they might touch on whatever you have, move closer to it. They might put it in their mouth to see what it tastes like.
They probably will.
Well, they will, but, you know, but they're paying attention to what you're doing, and they're not like, you don't have this one thing and they're over doing their own thing. They're attentive and they're like asking if they can or go.
Perfect. So here's a question, and it's rhetorical, but how many of you are attentive and engaging with any kind of curiosity right now?
Me on and off, because we did this a little bit.
But it's tough, right? It's tough. And this is the other thing, depending on moods, depending on time of day, depending on what's going on in the child's life, depending on what's going on in your life, your ability to attend and engage fluctuates, right? Curiosity, you can't force yourself to be interested in something. If it's not interesting, how are you attending to it and engaging with it? Right. And I think that's the thing is, as teachers, we need to make things engaging and interesting, which is part of why I tried to pull in some of the other states because that's interesting to me. I like to see the contrast and the differences between all of the states. But this is not the most exciting content area, and I know that. How about shows persistence? What does that look like? What do you do for that? What do you think about shows persistence? What does that mean?
If they can't stand up, they keep trying.
Yep.
I have an example, and in the school, we try to purify water with plastic bottles and dirt and rocks and sticks, and we put like dirty water, and they have to use that to make it clear. So they put like the rocks first, they the dirt, and they try the water. And I think they need persistence for do that, because some of them just like try it and they didn't like get it, but another ones they tried at the end, and I think that I really love it because it was like learning by doing.
Absolutely. And here's what's interesting about persistence is that it's actually a temperament trait. So some of us are by nature, it's just part of our temperament, right? It's just part of who we are very persistent and just don't give up, right? It's that dog with a bone. Some of us have very low persistence and like are very quick to give up or to be discouraged from something or not have interest in trying again. So the persistence piece, I think it's interesting because it's a temperament, right? So how do we change somebody's temperament? And that takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes persistence on our end as the teachers. How about approaches tasks with flexibility? How are we flexibly approaching tasks? What does that look like?
If a child is trying to do something one way and you're like, how about you try it this way? And they, you know, try it that way, or not exactly, or if they do it on their own, you know, they seeing that the puzzle piece doesn't go right there, they might figure out, okay, let me try to put it in another space. You know, they're approaching with different.
I think one of the most amazing things about little kids is their creativity, right? Like the way they come up with some of the craziest ways to do things. You're like, I would never have thought of that. So I think part of that approaching tasks flexibly is that they're not conditioned yet to think that there's a right way or a wrong way to do things, or what, you know, the best way is to do it. They're gonna climb up on top of that table any which way they can, right? They're not going to use the chair to put their, you know, to climb up on it. They're going to find a way to do it. But I think that's what it is. Like, so, you know, we have to think, how do we give them opportunities to do something with some of that flexibility, to not have to do it that one right way. And sometimes that means that we have to give up the control of what we want it to look like or how we want it to happen, and just let them do it. So this last one I think is interesting, using symbols and takes on pretend roles. So give me some examples of how you've seen this in your class. I think instantly of dramatic play, but what do you guys think of with using symbols and pretend roles?
Make the babies. They take care about the babies.
So
And
why
you
do we
can,
go ahead?
sorry, and you can use that, like what color is the dress, or how you can take about what you need first, and then you can motivate her to learn language and vocabulary and use it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I
Use
always,
it block as a telephone.
that's exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for something on my desk that I could pick up and pretend it was a telephone. It's a notebook. But yeah, so when we think about that and using symbols and taking on pretend roles, how does that relate to logic and reasoning? How does that relate to, if we come back to the previous slide, to, come on, go back, to impulse control, to problem solving, to decision making? How does that using symbols and taking on pretend roles connect to that?
I mean, you can teach children how to use symbolic props versus like actually having it. So it's like if both students want it, then you can be like, oh, you can use this instead of having that to still do the same thing. So just teaching them like how to pretend to use something else. And we do it all the time. Like we'll use something that's not what it is to show them how to use symbolic props.
Awesome. And I think that that comes into really helping them to develop this ability to approach tasks flexibly, right? So if we're helping them use pretend play or use symbols, it's encouraging them to be creative and to think creatively. And I think that's where some of this comes into play as well. Any other thoughts about these 4 substrands, subcategories? No? What I want to do before we go into the groups, I want to pull up the Pennsylvania one because I just want to show you a difference. So Pennsylvania also has 4, right? So constructing and gathering knowledge, organizing and understanding information, applying knowledge, and learning through experience. So similar to what DC says, but it's a little bit different. I also like the fact that Pennsylvania kind of gives this really long, in-depth overview of each of the content areas. But what I wanted to come to was the glossary. So interesting, in the glossary for approaches to learning, is talking about the different types of play. So knowing if a child is in cooperative play versus parallel play versus solitary play is going to help us determine what they can do with approaches to learning. If they're not ready for cooperative play yet, then there are definitely some things that we're not going to be able to get them to do, right? But again, I think that looking at, like it even gives the definition for intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And when we're thinking about approaches to learning and that ability to be persistent, that motivation, that internal intrinsic motivation is really important. So again, each state's a little bit different. I just wanted to take a second to show you the glossary. So what I'm gonna have you guys do is, let me, okay, so. All right, so we're gonna do breakout rooms. So give me a second to get them set up so that we have the 4 rooms. And I'm gonna name the rooms according to each of the subcategories. So what I want you guys to do is think about activities, experiences, whatever, to enhance or to give children the opportunity to learn how to approach learning. So give me 1 second. All right, so when I open up the rooms, 10 minutes, I think, might even be a little too long. If you guys are finding that you've come up with as much as you can come up with, and you want to come back to the whole group, then I can cut it short for everybody else too. But I'll start with kind of a 10-minute plan, and if you guys are 6-7 minutes into it, you're ready to get out, we can come back to the group. All right, so rooms are open.
What's up, Nikki? How you doing today, Professor?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm trying to get caught up on sleep. I ended up having a phone call with a colleague last night and I was on the phone till almost 11 o'clock.
That's late.
It was late, especially after teaching, and yeah. I'm usually in bed, sound asleep by 11 o'clock.
My phone goes on do not disturb at like 8 o'clock.
Yeah, that's.
And my coworkers know that they're not getting through to me until my alarm hits the next day.
Yeah, my do not disturb, I think, is set for from 10 to 7. But she had messaged me earlier in the day and was like, hey, can we have some time to chat? And I'm like, absolutely. I'm like, I can chat before class or after class. And she's like, let's do after class. And of course I was like, oh man. Yeah, we ended up chatting. Lots of really neat things are happening in Delaware. She's really involved in some public policy stuff. And so we were just talking all things AYC and public policy forum that's coming up. But yeah, we were both like, okay, we're getting delirious. We need to get off the phone. So how did you guys feel about this? How did you feel about this activity?
It was good, but the one we had to really think about it. So it was a tough, but I think we came up with something.
Yeah, this one was not easy, guys. I think that in the next weeks as we go through this, it will get easier to do this. This is the tough one. This is the hard one to do. So so let's see. Is there any group that wants to start first and kind of share what you guys came up with?
We'll go ahead and knock it out the way, Professor.
Go for it.
So we had use of symbolic items as well as engaging in pretend play. We came up with having different activities that engages children and allowing them the autonomy to utilize the materials that are around them, as well as giving them the approach of being able to make their symbolic props where they'll be able to take more care of them because it's things that they've made, as well as an approach that a few of us already do that's called make-believe play practice. And that's where the teachers are able to basically like interactive model how to pretend play or teach a concept thematically or what we would like them to know in a certain sensor. And then that way we can show them how to use symbolic props and we can like show them, oh, I don't have a phone, but I have this bottle right here, dial the number and things of that sort.
Awesome. Does anybody have any other ideas on how to incorporate symbolic, how to help children learn how to use symbolic play and as an approach to learning? I think when we get to some of the other content areas, this is going to be way easier. So I get it. This one's tough. And I think, just hearing everybody else talk and share some ideas. When we all get done, I actually went through some of them and wrote down some of the suggestions from the standards. So we'll go back and kind of talk about some of those too. Who wants to go next? Which group wants to go next?
I'll go next with I'm with the group shows persistence. And we didn't get to the DC standards, but we did find some activities that that we could do. So, it varies depending on age, but we said rolling a ball back and forth, trying to bounce the ball, throw the ball, or put a ball into a hoop, um, building blocks and letting, they fall down and trying to rebuild them and stuff. Any type of fine motor activity that consists of like using chopsticks or putting beads on a string or something could be very hard, and doing it over and over again could work. Balancing on a beam, like if you have to walk outside on the on a balance beam or something without holding a teacher's hand or something. Climbing ladders, putting on their clothes, buttoning up their shirt or zipping up something, just being able to grip it or something like that. Pulling up their pants, putting on their shoes, um, on the right feet or something. Anything with clothing.
That's awesome. And I think I think with this, I think sometimes we overthink this one, approaches to learning in general. And once we really start to get into it and we realize how much we're doing this every day, all the time, and we just don't even realize that this is what we're doing. So again, kind of taking the time to bring attention to it and awareness to it so that you guys can actually put a name to some of the things that you're doing and why you're doing it. And you can be like, oh yeah, I did do something today. Because we all know that some days we're like, man, I didn't do anything constructive with the kids. But if you're working with these kids on potty training, on getting dressed, putting their coats on, like that's a process, and being persistent with it, right? Zipping up those coats, that's tough. You got to keep trying. And we say those things to kids all the time. Awesome. Anybody have any go ahead, Bree.
One I forgot was like, I know for one, I'm working on with my kids with having temper tantrums and stuff, like multiple throughout the day. So just persistence with, okay, I'm angry, let's breathe, and all this kind of stuff. So you have to remind her and keep doing it, and she'll get frustrated. So like just persistence with that, and having them work through their social emotional skills and using their words and stuff. Like you said, it's like kind of random because you don't know when they'll have these things, but I feel like that's a really good persistence thing.
Yeah, and I think if you guys all were to pay attention next time you're with your group of kids, to how often are you encouraging them to be persistent? How often are you doing these things? And you'll probably realize that you're doing it way more than you think that you are. And like I said, I think that'll help kind of bring it to light. And if you can realize when you're doing it or recognize when somebody else is doing it, that will help you build your skills to do these things more often as well, and to incorporate it a little bit more. And if you're mindful of it, then you can be more intentional about it too. All right, so that's 2 groups. Who wants to go next?
I don't mind going next for my group, but I forgot what our topic was.
That's all right. Let's see. Let me look at them. So we did persistence and symbolic play. So you're either approaching the task flexibly or attending and engaging with curiosity.
Yes, attending and engaging with curiosity was ours. Okay. So for infants, we said like a good activity would be peekaboo, because we disappear and come back. They're curious on where we gone. I actually had a study on that, and it says that most infants actually think that we've disappeared when we put our hands over our face. So then they did hide the rattle, like when you put the rattle behind your back. It's like some magician stuff. They want to know what happened to the rattle. So for toddlers, we said building blocks and textures, because kids always like to touch stuff. So I'm pretty sure they're curious about the texture of stuff. For pre-K and kindergarten, we said puzzles and like reading a book. When it comes to puzzles, putting the thing together, they're curious about what they're creating. So at the end of it, they're like, "Hey, it's a cat," And then reading the book, explaining what happens next, you guys, what you think gonna happen next. Then you turn the page and you're like, wow, this happened. I thought this was gonna happen. Yes. So then first grade, we said discovery games, like mystery games. Second and third grade, we said like cooking and the game 7 Up, when like you put your head down and people tap on you, gotta see who tapped you and stuff. Yeah.
I haven't played that game in forever. Awesome. Anybody else have any other ideas to add to that?
Stop.
Yes, Marie. Okay. All right. So then final group. This is the flexibility one.
Okay, I can go.
Okay, Jill, go ahead.
Okay, so in the flexibility, we put when they play outside, like soccer or another play, they need to have a resolution who is gonna do it first and taking tours and follow rules. And also in dramatic area, when they wear like a costume and they need to have a resolution, as well as if another peer wants to use the same costume. And also we come out with, we can create objects also to create flexibility, and toys that they can put in practice to take turns. And that is all. I don't know if someone wants to expand more about it.
Awesome. Anybody else have anything to add to that one?
I think it's also important for us to keep that in mind for ourselves, because it's not just one way that we should have a child do something. All children are different, and we need to make sure that we are always open-minded to ensure that we're reaching every child.
And I think that comes into that being aware of different modalities and different ways that children learn, and that we have to adapt our teaching modalities, right? So we tend to teach the way that we learn, which is why I have to type things, I have to write things out. That's how I learn. That's how I do things, which is why I do the PowerPoint. But it's also because I know that some people can hear it and do well with it, so they don't need that visual, but some people need the visual. And I can say whatever I'm going to say, but if they don't have that visual in front of them to help, it doesn't stick. So I think you're right, that flexibility for us, that persistence for us, all of these things we need to keep in mind for ourselves as well. But yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? Any other?
Yes, I have something to mention. It that is super important and bring me to my mind a memory that I work with students that have like special needs, and sometimes I feel like teachers are like, why he needs to go outside, or why he needs this, he don't need that, and they take it away. And I think we also need to be like flexible to understand about the other students need some tools.
Absolutely. 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 So, if you guys didn't take a chance, the opportunity to look through the Pennsylvania version of the standards, I really encourage you to. So I was just kind of skimming through that while you guys were wrapping up your conversations. So some of the things that were listed, asking I wonder questions. How many times do you say, I wonder what's going to happen? I wonder what this is going to do. I wonder what will happen with this. I wonder if it's going to snow tomorrow, right? I wonder what the weather is. Those are all questions. That I wonder statement is a really great way to include approaches to learning. So it's maybe not an activity that you're doing, but if you keep in the back of your mind by asking I wonder questions, or asking what if questions, that's the other one that you can ask. I mean, that's such a simple thing, but if you think about if you've had to do lesson plans where you had to like draw out and spell out every single step of your lesson and every question that you're going to ask and all of that. These what if and I wonder questions should be part of every activity. And until it becomes a regular part of your routine and kind of habit for you, it might be really good for you to go through your lesson plan for the week and give yourself some reminders on where do you want to ask those questions. I put it in my books when I read, I wonder whatever, right? But to kind of set some reminders up for yourselves around the classroom, right? Where can you ask I wonder questions? Where can you ask what if questions? Those can be done pretty much anywhere and everywhere. And you guys should be incorporating them into a regular part of your routine. Asking guessing questions. So there's so many games out there that are guessing games, but guessing, guessing what's this. I love the one where you have like a bag or a box that you can't see in, and the kids have to put their hand in it and try and figure out what it is that they found, right? Or and those are typically like a sensory experience because it's all by touch, right? So you can have them put their hand in and say, can you find the round, the circle or the ball versus the fork, right? And so those are all kinds of those guessing things, and that helps with this approach to learning as well. In one of the other areas, they talked about giving children time to warm up. So just like all of us, right? How many of you don't function until you've had your second cup of coffee for the day? Right? I'm not a coffee drinker, but my son is, and I get it. I understand it. I don't get out of my funk until I've had a conversation with somebody, right? So I can go hours before I'm really fully awake and fully functioning. It's until I have a conversation with somebody other than the voices in my own head. It's the joys of living by yourself, right? You don't have conversations with people until later in the day. So making sure that we're allowing for time for children to warm up and giving them that flexibility and that ability to really take their time with something, especially when it's something new. Or especially if they're tired or they're hungry or they're just being a toddler, because that's just what they do, right? So we want to make sure that we're giving them time to warm up. Introduce new things to them. And when you introduce new things, make sure that you are explaining it. What is it? How do you use it? Why did you bring it in? Right? So kind of explaining it a little bit. When you do bring in new things, try to pair it up with something that's more familiar. So if you're going to introduce, for example, a new art technique, maybe the kids are used to doing tempera paint, but they haven't had a lot of experience with watercolors. Or maybe you're going to have them do a collage, and they're used to stamps, but they're not used to stickers or something like that, right? So kind of giving them something new in something familiar or in conjunction with something that's a little bit more familiar. One of the best things you guys can do, and if you're part of a STARS program or that uses the environment rating scale, rotating your materials, right? So you should, in most of your centers, be changing out your materials on a regular basis, and I want to say like on a monthly-ish basis, right? So how many of you get bored and rearrange your bedroom or your living room or whatever? How many of you, right? That retail therapy thing, that, right? It comes in because we need something new. We need something exciting. Kids get bored with the same stack of puzzles. Rotate out their puzzles for them. Give them something new to try. They get bored with it. They've mastered it, right? So we're not giving them that opportunity to try their skills at being persistent, at coming up with flexible ways to do things, and really being persistent with something new. So rotate your materials out. And it's not a matter of changing, taking out all of your fine motor materials. But instead of the bare, the counting bears, maybe they are counting dinosaurs this month. There are so many new materials that you can use with those types of things. And really It's hard if your program doesn't have the money to purchase extra materials, but it is something to think about. And even if it's things that you can make to be able to rotate, file folder games for the older kids. I was a huge fan of file folder games. It was something really easy that I could make, and I could change those out on a pretty consistent basis. If you don't know what file folder games are, let me know. I'll be happy to. I gave mine all away when I finally left the classroom, but I had quite the collection of file folder games that I had made over the years. Brainstorm with kids. Encourage them, kind of like we did tonight, right? Like, you come up with an idea and I'll come up with an idea, and what other ideas can we come up with, right? Somebody said it earlier, I learned from other people, right? No, it was Liverpool in the other class. In like, we each have something to share, we each have something to teach, so we can teach kids and they can teach us. So giving them that too funny, guys. Giving them that opportunity to brainstorm, right? And letting them really come up with their ideas. And then here's the key part: let them try it, right? It may not work, but that's okay. Let them give it a try, because you never know, it might work and you might be onto something new. One of the things that I know is a hard thing to do all the time, but if you have a child that's really, really, really working on something and they just haven't finished it in the time frame that you have for whatever reason, is there a way to save that work for later? Is there a way to put that art project up and come back to it when we come back inside, or to come back to it tomorrow? Is there a way to take whatever they made in the block area and block it off, so that when we come back in from recess or outside time, that they can come back to it? So that notion of saving work for later also helps them with that persistence, helps them with a lot of those pieces. So it's something to think about, right? It may not be an activity necessarily that you're doing, but it's the way that you're setting up your environment to allow for some of those things. Really think about how you can minimize interruptions and distractions. You know, ADD, it's real. It is real, but we all have a little bit of attention deficit, right? We can all so easily be distracted, and especially if we're getting interrupted. If you guys think about it, how do you feel when you're trying to watch your show and your kids keep coming in the room asking you questions? How do you feel in class when your kids keep coming up and trying to get your attention while you're trying to focus and pay attention to class? It's hard. So for our kiddos, it's even more difficult because they haven't figured out how to do it all yet. So we need to try to limit absolutely. We need to figure out how to limit distractions and limit interruptions for them. So setting them up in a space, especially the kids that you know that struggle with it, setting them up in a space that doesn't have all of the background noise. When I was in Ohio with my niece and nephew, I guess it was early this summer, we were all sitting at the table. My sister was working on something on the computer. My niece was working on a project. She's in 4-H, so she was working on her project. And my poor nephew, I was doing work. I was sitting at the computer working on my schoolwork. And my nephew was supposed to be like doing his spelling words or something awful. I mean, it was just nothing fun. We had the music going. My niece kept getting up and coming over to ask her mom questions. And every time my poor nephew, it was so many distractions, and he just could not concentrate on putting these sentences together. So I was like, all right, come on, bud, let's go into the other room, away from what your mom and your sister are doing, away from the music that's playing, and let's try to give you a space with fewer distractions, because he just couldn't focus on it. And he's 7, like, you know, who wants to focus on spelling words? But I turned it into a game. How quick can you write that word? How quick can you come up with a sentence? And I would set the timer on my phone. It was something simple, but it got him to get through the work and kind of keep that persistence. So I think that's something important for us to think about in eliminating, minimizing distractions and interruptions. If you've looked into the high curriculum, they have their whole approach is this plan, do, review. And I am completely fascinated by it. I think it's a really amazing approach to encourage children to pre-plan, like what is it that you're going to do when you get into dramatic play today, right? And then follow up with them. Did you make your cake like you said you were going to? Why not? What happened? What if, I wonder, right? And it opens up that opportunity for all of those questions, but really encouraging children to pre-plan. What are we going to do today? How are you going to make this? How are you going to, what are you going to build in the block area? So those were just a few of the things that I found in less than 5 minutes by skimming through the approaches to learning section in the Pennsylvania standards. So I want to make sure that you guys know that there are other resources out there. And just because the DC standards state those 4 pieces, the examples that they give may not be as rich as what some other states give. And you may have to be a little flexible in your own thinking and see where, you know, one state may say it one way, but DC says it another way. But if you get that they're the same thing, it will help you guys. So I really do encourage you guys, especially as you're coming up with the activities for your lesson plan, your web and your daily plan, use those other resources. Think about how you're doing approaches to learning in your classroom. It is the hardest one to do by far. And I think if we just kind of think about it a little bit and pay attention to some of the words that we're using, I think we'll find that we're actually doing it a lot. Akuya, I love it. You don't talk to your coworkers until the kids come in the door. That's awesome.
Like, I am not a morning person at all. I have to talk to a child first for my light switch to go on. Other than that, people and even my coworkers know, like, all right, I didn't want to speak to you. I'll talk to you after 7:45.
And it's amazing what kids can do to us, right? Like just the fact that kids can flip that switch for us, adults, and when adults can't. Like, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the last piece that that we wanted to go over tonight, I'm gonna pull this up so I can look at it, is the integrating into the environment. So what are some ideas that you guys have? How can we integrate approaches to learning into our classrooms? We've talked about a lot of them. I think especially with approaches to learning, because it's not necessarily an activity that you plan for. It's really how you just kind of integrate these questions and some of this intentionality into the environment. But does anybody have any other ideas on integrating approaches to learning into your environment?
Bringing someone from outside resources.
Bringing outside resources in, absolutely. Anybody else? So what I want to share with you guys, one last thing that I want to share with you, but give me a second because I didn't have it open. I was not thinking about it earlier. So I shared a couple of things for you guys in Blackboard. There's a how to support children's approaches to learning, an article that I found. So I encourage you guys to check that out too. But what I wanted to share with you was this crazy list that I've done. So in all of the weeks, I have a Professor Spencer's whatever across the curriculum. So approaches to learning across the curriculum. I actually did this several, like 10 or 12 years ago. I did this a long time ago. And I couldn't find it recently, so I had to redo it because I think I've told you guys I'm helping my friend at her center with some of her NACCE standards. So I'm helping her with one of her bulletin board displays where each month we're looking at a different domain. And I wanted to help them see how in each of their centers or in each of their areas that they're doing all of these different things. So approaches to learning really hits hard in the social emotional, right? So, and these are the preschool early learning foundations. This is the Delaware version. But so for each of the content areas that we're going to talk about, I have these up. I shared these with you guys. You could go through yourself looking at the DC early learning standards and say, okay, where all throughout my day do I use approaches to learning? Right? And you would probably really be surprised. But what I did, the reason I created this document the first time several years ago was I actually set it up. I took this list and I printed it off and put like in the block area. What all can children do in the block area? How many of the content areas, how many of the domains are we, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Are they doing when they're playing with the blocks, right? They're doing math, they're doing science, they're doing language. But what I did was I put all of the standards that could be done in the block area up on the wall for two reasons. One, for my own purpose as the teacher, and for the other teachers in the classroom, so that when I'm sitting in the block area playing with children, I can glance up at that and be like, oh yeah, that's right. Let's incorporate, you know, language in this, or let's incorporate science in this. But I also did it for the parents, right? Because parents are like, oh, you just play all day. Okay, well, let me show you how just playing all day is touching on all of these content areas and what they're really actually learning while they're just playing all day. So it is something, I think, Deidre, you were talking about how, you know, you just want to do your activities and that. I think if you were to do something like this and take the time to go through the standards, and really think about each area in your classroom and what all you're actually doing in that area, I think you would surprise yourself on how many of the standards you're doing on a regular basis. But it will also help you see the standards that maybe you're not hitting on as frequently. And we'll give you some new ideas maybe on how to do them. So, so I did the preschool, the infant, toddler, and then my friend's center uses Mother Goose curriculum. So I went through their curriculum standards and connected those so that when they saw on their lesson plan that, you know, this activity had 1.1 on it, expressing preferences, right? That's part of their approaches to learning. So I went through and added these all in. And then what I also did, so while the Delaware Early Learning Foundations are not applicable to you guys directly in your classrooms, it gives you kind of a general sense, right? You may not be using Mother Goose curriculum, but you can think about your own curriculum. For those of you that are in one of the programs that's using the ERS, this is really helpful, just kind of thinking about all of the different subscale items from the environment rating scales that would focus on approaches to learning, or each of the areas. So I wanted to share these documents with you guys so that you have them, so you can see them, because I do think it's helpful. Sometimes we just need that reminder for ourselves. This one, the approaches to learning, is a short document. Some of the other ones are really long because social studies, you know, when you're doing social studies, there's so many concepts that you're covering in there from all of the different content areas. So feel free to use this document to reference it, to, you know, have it as a resource for you guys, to maybe inspire you to do something similar for yourself. It's in Blackboard. So it's just a document that you guys can get to through Blackboard. So any questions about approaches to learning other than it's not our favorite? No. All right. So that was really all I had for us for tonight. I really just wanted to make sure that we had kind of walked through what approaches to learning was, and thinking about how we're able to integrate it into our classrooms. see what is on for next week. Next week, we are going to focus on social emotional diversity and creative arts. So on Monday, we'll focus on the social emotional pieces. So if you want to kind of go through the DC early learning standards between now and then, and really kind of take some time to look at what the early learning standard says for social emotional, what some of the activities are, what some of the substrands are, that may be helpful for you. If you want to take some time to peruse some of the other ones that I shared with you guys, I'll put those links up in social emotional. It's the other one that's tough. It's the other one that's tough to plan activities for. Like, you can't plan an activity on when you're gonna say I'm sorry. You can't plan an activity on using your manners, right? Like, it's all day, every day. But so yeah, so we'll talk on that one next week. You guys crack me up.
Deja. And then you want to bobblehead it out. I'll be like, okay, just stop crying, stop. What do you do? I can't understand you. Stop. Then I'll be
I
like,
love
oh,
social
it's the
emotional.
baby.
I did actually the curriculum for my school for social emotional, because we had like a
You
whole
will talk a
block
lot next
social
class.
emotional. So it's my
So don't be
baby.
absent on Monday, Deidre, because you're gonna run the show on Monday. We're gonna turn it over to you.
Make sure I won't be here.
No, you have to be here. Bree will track you down.
I sure will.
All right, so next week we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna talk about social emotional and diversity and creative arts. Next week, what do you guys have due next week? The lesson plan web is due next week. So this week is the quiz and the director interview. Next week is the lesson plan. So it's the web for like the whole week. So there should be multiple activities for each for the whole week. And then we're going to take one of those activities and we're going to flush it out for a day. Or I'm sorry, we're going to take some of those activities and make a daily plan. And then from that daily plan, you're going to take one activity and flush it out with some of the accommodations. And with some of the adaptations, some of those other parts and pieces. So I'm kind of looking at this as you have your big weekly web, you're going to break that down into a daily plan, and then you're going to take one activity and break it down even further. Does anybody have any questions about the lesson plan activity, or do we want to talk about that next week, closer to when it's due?
Is that this Saturday or next one?
Next Saturday. That's due the 13th.
Oh, I have it wrong in my
Next
calendar.
week.
Yep. Let me.
Professor.
Yes.
Professor, I have a question.
Yes.
For so the daily lesson plan and the large, I forgot the name. They can be the same team, or I can use different teams for both.
Sure. So let me pull it up and we'll kind of walk through it a little bit more. So let's see. Let me share screen. So I don't know how well you guys can see this. So was it last week that we did this? So so the bottom one here is the weekly, right? And so you can see that for each of the activities, I have multiple, or for each of the content areas, I have multiple activities. So this is your unit plan. This is your big web for the whole week. And then you're going to take something from each one of these areas to create your daily, right? So if our whole week was on insects, I'm going to take one day and focus on the very hungry caterpillar. And then all of my activities that day should be something that came out of this bigger web for the week. And then I'm going to take one of these activities and I'm going to break it down. So I have for you guys up here the sample of how I took one of these activities and broke it down. So you've got a sample of the weekly plan, a sample of the daily plan, and then the activity breakdown sample is there as well. Does that help, Marie, answer your question?
Yes, Professor.
Is
Okay.
these templates?
You can use them. They're blank versions up here. If you want to use them, you can.
Cool.
If you have something else, use it. I don't want you guys to feel like you have to recreate something. But if you want to use these, the blank ones are here and you're welcome to download them. They're Word documents. You can do what you want with them. And same thing with the activity breakdown. So the blank one is here. That I would like you guys to use the template that I provided there. The webs, you don't have to use those templates, but you can. But then, like I said, I gave you the example of the activity breakdown.
Okay, Professor.
So,
Yes.
I'm a little confused on that breakdown. I don't know if you're about to dismiss class. I can stay so you can break it down a little bit more to me. But
we can do that. No, we can, Nasia. We can. I'll see if anybody else has any other questions, and if nobody else has any other questions, anybody that wants to stay on for a little bit more of an in-depth on breaking that down, we can. If you don't want to stay on, you're welcome to hop off. But does anybody else have any other questions before I let you guys go? I know, Lamont, I think you had a question.
yes. So can I just use like, because we use teaching strategy go. So it's like basically everything that you want. Can I just use that and then go into detail with, is that okay?
Yep, that's fine. So the only thing with the teaching strategies, and I forget, one of you sent me an example of your teaching strategies that was literally like on your.
Yeah, that was me.
Perfect. I knew somebody had. So I think with something like that, the one that you shared with us or shared with me, Shaquita, it seemed to really focus on like language and literacy and physical development, but it didn't really incorporate any of the other content areas. So if you want to take what you have, just make sure that you're incorporating many content areas. So I think that's the only thing, Lamont, with teaching strategies or with creative curriculum, is that you just want to make sure that you have all of those activities listed. And I've been toying with trying to give you guys like, I don't want to tell you which content areas you have to have, but I think that I kind of need to give you some framework, right? So I think that if you look at the web that I created, the sample one, I would like to see activity ideas for all of those content areas.
Okay. Perfect.
So if the plan that you have posted on your wall right now has all of those areas, use that plan.
Yeah,
Smarter, not harder.
Right, because ours, you choose what you want to put into what you want, the objectives and all that to be. So for mine, we pretty much cover everything that we've been talking about.
Awesome.
So you have to go more direct into in detail with the activity though. Okay.
Yep, that'll be perfect. Like I said, I don't want you guys to recreate something. If you have something that you're using at work, use it. And like I said, you may just have to add to it a little bit. But yeah, don't recreate something if you don't have to.
And Miss May, it was really good to see your face. Finally.
All right. Any other questions? Or if you guys are good, go ahead, enjoy the rest of your evening. For those of you that want to stay on and talk a little bit more about breaking down the activities, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up those documents so that we can look at those.
Hey, Bree, just so you know, I read this book to my kids today, The Way I Feel. I love this book. So that's why I was like, I'm a social skills guru. So yeah, I read this book today.
No, I just be wanting them to skip to the point. Tell me, you mad?
Do you know
sad?
this book,
You happy?
Professor Spencer?
I do. Is that one of the actresses? Is it an actress that wrote that book?
No, Janin Kane, but Jamie Lee Curtis has one too.
Yes, that was the one I was thinking of, was Jamie Lee Curtis's book. But
I have that one too.
I have seen that one. I may have that one tucked away in my box of books.
Yeah, so yeah.
I think it's just payback because I was a crybaby. My grandma said I just cry. Just all through my youth. So it's probably just payback. And so now I'm just like, as soon as I hear it, I'm just like, Oh my gosh, tell me what's wrong. Like, stop, for real, stop. I'm getting better though. I'm getting better.
I'm just going to use the web, Professor Spencer, because
Okay.
I feel like my lesson plan is not that detailed. Like it is detailed, but it's not. So I'm just going to use the web. So
Okay.
the only thing I have a question for is like, so I do the unit and then I do the daily. Am I doing an activity from off the daily?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So so let me pull up, we'll start with that. And this may help. Instead of thinking big to small, let's start with the small and go big. So let's look at the activity breakdown first. So this is my art activity that I had planned. So the activity is creating this butterfly, right? So I took the activity and then we're hitting all of these things. Use this template. Let me know the standards that you're using.
Is this template on there?
It is. Yep, it's the
Okay.
activity breakdown.
Okay.
Yep. And then you're gonna let me know learning objectives. And I kind of gave you guys some reminders here, right? So make sure that your standards line up with your domain, right? So there's a ton of standards that we could connect to an art project. But because this is an art project, let's really try to focus on the art standards. So have your activity, you're going to give me some of the standards, you're going to give me your learning objective, what materials are needed for it, what your introduction would be, any accommodations, adaptations, or differentiations that you can do, and then how you're going to assess that the children learned based off of what your objective was, right? So your objective should connect with your assessment and it should all connect to your activity. So that's the breakdown. So if you just, any activity that you want to do, one that you're really comfortable with, one that you've done a lot, you can take that and break it down with this. And then from that, you can take that activity. So Nigel, I'm going to put you on the spot. So what's one of your favorite activities to do with the kids?
I'm more of a music type.
Okay. All right. So
it has to do with music, like making songs. I love creating songs.
All right, perfect. So if we were going to create a song, or we could, so let's say we're going to create a song, and some of your standards would be maybe repeating the rhythm, right? And rhyming, right? So those are two things that we do when we have a song. We have to have a rhythm piece to it, and oftentimes it rhymes, especially with little kids. So those could be your two standards. What's your objective? What is it that you're trying to get the kids to do? Is it that you want them to rhyme certain words? Then that would be your objective, right? What materials you're going to need for this. You may not need any materials other than maybe a piece of paper and a pencil, or marker or something to write down what the kids come up with, right? And to give them instruments to make their rhythm with, or whatever it is. Your warm up to it. So how would you introduce that you're going to create a new song? How would you introduce that?
I don't know. I've heard we'll play like a song. We like, y'all like this beat, We're going to make up a song to this beat,
Perfect. So
like
that's your warm up. So your warm up would be having listened to another song, and like you said, like, oh, I like this beat. Can we make this beat? Can we do this? And I have no rhythm. I cannot keep a beat to save my life. My son's a drummer, and it floors me every time I see him play. I'm like, how do you do that? But so yeah. So how do we make that beat? What can we do to make that? And then let's create a new song to go with it. So that could be your introduction, right? And maybe you have a couple of songs that have a similar beat. And then accommodations, adaptations, and differentiations. For this one, you could, oh, I can't see the chat box. I see that somebody put something in there, but I can't see it. It won't open.
I was just saying that I also don't have any rhythm when it comes to dancing, but my oldest son, he be getting down. I'm like, I don't know where that came from. It did not come from me.
I know where my sons came from. His dad is musical, and his dad plays the drums, and his dad plays guitar and all that. So I know where he got it from. And it's not me. I cannot And I'm amazed every time I watch. um, so with this activity, accommodations, adaptations, or differentiation. So what you're going to think about is how can you help the child who maybe struggles with keeping a beat, right? What kind of material can you give them to help them keep the beat better, like a metronome, right? So maybe they watch the metronome and that helps them keep the beat. An adaptation would be maybe instead of keeping the beat, maybe this child is coming up with some of the rhymes. Or if the child's struggling with rhymes, maybe you can use easier rhyming words that they're more familiar with, rhymes that they already know, as part of your song. So those would be ideas for like accommodation and adaptation. And then your assessment piece would be maybe you record the song that you guys create so that you can see if your objective was to come up with rhyming words. If you're writing them out on the paper, you're going to be able to see all of the rhyming words that they came up with, and you could note like who came up with which rhyme. And that could be part of your assessment. If you recorded it, then you would be able to hear which children said which rhyme, and that would help you with your assessment piece. So that's the breakdown. But so from that, let's then go, let's see, will it let me? I'll have to stop share. And then reshare with daily. Okay, so now that we know for music, let me edit. Why won't it let me edit? Okay, it's being silly. Oh, you know what? Because I think this is the picture and not the actual document. So under music, you would write create own song with rhyming words. That would be your activity for the day for your music, right? Listen to whatever song, create own rhymes to go with it. And then dramatic play. So if you were to come up with a theme that this music activity might fall under, what might that theme be for the week? So if we're creating music, maybe our theme is the Caribbean, right? So maybe this week we're learning all about the Caribbean, and the Caribbean has a very unique sound with their drum, right? The Caribbean drum is just, it's a beautiful sound, and it makes a very different rhythm, right?
Okay,
Like
so let's say you saying the Caribbean. So instead of, let's say, the hungry caterpillar, the Caribbean would fit in the hungry caterpillar section.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So are we making it like, I know you said a daily one, so are we doing it for like just one day or like a whole week?
So there's three pieces. So the first one, the activity breakdown, is just, you're going to take one activity and break it down. But then you're going to come up with a whole week, a whole day's worth of activities. So you're going to take one activity. So we did your music would be your activity breakdown. But then you need to give me this web for a whole day. So if the Caribbean is our theme for the day, what dramatic play might we do? What activity might we do in dramatic play to go along with the Caribbean? What would an art project be to go along with the Caribbean? What would an outside activity be to go along with that, right? And then, so that's going to be your daily, like a daily activity plan. And then we're going to do the full unit. Hold on, let me get this one up. So then we've got the unit. So this is where maybe the Caribbean is part of a unit on islands, right? So maybe our theme here is islands, and one of the islands are the Caribbean islands. There's lots of other islands. There's islands in Alaska. There's islands in Australia. There's islands in, they're all over the place, right? So if we were thinking islands in general, what other music activities could you come up with to go along with the theme of islands? So it could be that you're playing music from different regions, right? Different cultures. Maybe you're singing songs in different languages, depending on the culture or the location of the island. I don't know any songs off the top of my head about islands, but I'm sure there's songs about islands. If you Googled preschool songs for islands, I'm sure you would come up with a list of them, right? So give me a list of a week's worth of music ideas. But on this list should be the music activity that's in your daily plan that you're then going to break down for your activity plan. But you only have to break down one activity. Yeah, just one activity. So so if we think about this, so you start with your one activity that you've broken down, and then take that and create a whole day off of whatever theme that could come up with. So then you're going to give me, that's your daily web of activities, one activity for each of those sections for the day. One of those is going to be the music activity that you broke down, right? And then you're going to take that daily web and you're going to plop all of those activities into your weekly web, and you're going to add more to it.
Okay, so basically it's like a unit, and then I gotta write, I gotta be more in detail with a chapter.
Take a unit, take the chapter, and then a paragraph.
Gotcha.
That helps.
That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Does that help everybody else out? We're good. Does anybody have any other questions about that, or maybe a different way to kind of think about it?
Professor.
Yes, Marie.
I'm kind of lost. So I was thinking my team. I was thinking about like community helpers.
Okay. Perfect.
And then I will be talking about one specific community helper, like a nurse. Mm-hmm. And then, so for my daily plan, I was thinking maybe like what the job the nurse does, like what the nurse do. So then I don't know.
Sure. So if your weekly theme, right, the big web is community helpers.
It's a community helper, yes.
Yep. So in all of those areas, you're going to come up with different things to do for community helpers. So in the blocks, one day you're going to have
yes.
Yeah, you're going to set up a hospital in the dramatic play. One day it's going to be a fire station. You're going to have art activities that are going to go along with whichever that is. So if that's your, go ahead.
So the way I was thinking, like, I don't know if I'm right. So I was thinking maybe I can do that, and then for maybe science, let them watch like germs. Like a look through microscope to see how germs or stuff like that. And for science, like use a soap to wash their hands.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
or even to give them a microscope to look at what a germ would look like under a microscope.
Exactly. So I was thinking about also like talking about how to eat healthy, no get sick, like how to keep in shape, maybe how to exercise. Is related to nurse, right? Like eat fruit and vegetables, stuff like that, and read them book about germs and not for sharing books.
Absolutely.
And also about how to eat and move. Exercise. Yeah. I don't know if I'm right. I don't know if that's
so here's the thing, Marie, there's not really a wrong answer to any of this. It's really just as long as there's activities planned out so that you've really thought through a big picture, paring it down, and then really paring it down to the nitty gritty. And that's fine. Yes. And here's what I'm going to tell you. If you want to send something over to me by email, if you want to send it as an attachment for me to look at, to make sure that you're on the right track, I'm happy to.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right. Anybody else with any questions, or are we good to go?
Yes, I have something. I just wanted to say, activities playing out in all areas, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, that's what I was just looking at. Okay, that's it for me.
Right, wonderful.
Thank you
All
so
right. Well, if you, oh, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Aisha. How are
Hello.
you?
Finding yourself. So I was
Good.
listening and I was listening and getting some ideas from the ladies who were just on. So I think I'm gonna try because I have no experience with this, but I'm gonna look at the documents and everything that you provided and just try to see if I understand it and send you a draft. And then that
Absolutely.
way you can give me feedback and let me know if I'm going in the right direction.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay, so I'm gonna give it a try. But thank you so
Okay.
much and have a
You're
good
very
night.
welcome. You too. Have a good night.
Okay, bye bye.
All right, Vanessa, Marie, anything else?
Thank you, Professor. Bye bye.
You're welcome. Have a great night, ladies.
I will email you. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.